Welcome once again as we walk with Jesus through the Passion Week. Today is Thursday. This morning, as Jesus wakes up there in Bethany, he will send two of his disciples, Peter and John, to go on ahead of him into Jerusalem. They have instructions because Jesus will foretell that there's going to be a servant who's carrying a water jug. Follow that servant to the home. Ask the master of the home if they could use the upper room, and he will again prepare the room for the Passover feast. As John and Peter go into town, sure enough, just as Jesus stated, everything is getting ready, and that upper room is being prepared for them to be used to celebrate the Passover feast. Jesus, at this point, as he is entering in Jerusalem, he's become quite the celebrity in the towns and in the people's eyes, and so he kind of goes in to a degree of secrecy because the plot is coming against him as well. And so once they get to the upper room, it's really much a closed doors at that point. As they are getting ready to sit down for the meal, Jesus is going to take this opportunity to get up from the table and wash his disciples' feet. We know that Peter refuses that. Jesus simply encourages him and says, I need to wash your feet, otherwise you have no part of me. And Peter then will say, then give me a whole bath. At this point, Jesus is going to clarify and just say, hey, some of you are just needing to have your feet washed, but one of you is totally unclean, predicting Judas in regards to his betrayal and his evil heart and intentions. They're going to go ahead and have a seat and sit down and have the Lord's table, and as part of the Passover table, as they do that meal, before they participate in what we know as the Lord's table. Judas is going to be pointed out as the betrayer. Jesus will dip his bread into his wine and give it to Judas, and Jesus will then turn to him and say, whatever you're going to do so quickly. And then Judas will leave there as Satan has entered into him. He will go and get to the temple guard and get everything ready for the arrest of Jesus later this evening. The rest of the disciples are going to go ahead and participate in the Passover with Jesus. At the end of that meal, they will sing a hymn to close up that time of togetherness, of that celebration. And Jesus will then, as they're just reclining, talk about his second coming and coming to get his own. He's also going to use what we call the upper room discourse, which is basically a farewell address. It's like kind of an encouragement to his disciples to keep on keeping on. It's also the understanding of comfort that comes. Jesus will talk about the vine and the branches and then the need to be attached to Jesus to get their strength and be nurtured and to grow. He's also going to encourage them that the world hates you because you are following me. But then he turns right around and he gives them the promise of the Holy Spirit that he's going to come and enable them and empower them, and that he's not going to leave them alone. But then once again in this discourse, as he continues, says, I'm going to be leaving you shortly. It just gives them again a hope that they're not alone, that they can do this. At the end of that, he's going to pray the high priestly prayer, praying for them, praying for their strength, praying for their diligence, praying for us as well, that we would come to faith and do the same. And so what a joy it is to have us right there recorded in that prayer, that he was thinking of us when he was doing so. Right after that time, Jesus is going to then predict Peter's betrayal as they're getting ready to head out the door, go into the Garden of Gethsemane. And so Peter will say again that he would follow Jesus to the death. And Jesus predicts that by the time the rooster crows the third time, you're going to have betrayed me 3 times. When they arrive at the garden, they will be instructed to pray. Jesus will take with him Peter, James, and John, and they will go on ahead a little bit further from the rest of the disciples and pray. And Jesus will then continue just a little bit further on and pray himself. And at this point, pray that the Lord would take the cup of wrath away from him. And he prays that it's, again, within that, the surrenderedness, not my will, but your will be done. And so 3 times Jesus prays, 3 times Jesus comes back, finding the disciples sleeping. He encourages them to stay awake. and yet he knows their flesh is weak. So in the midst of this, Jesus is preparing for what is going to happen next, as Judas will come bringing a military entourage of probably 500 soldiers. And we will pick right there up tomorrow. I hope you have enjoyed Thursday as we really celebrate Good Friday tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.